Diabetic ketoacidosis. You've probably heard it called DKA. It's a full-blown metabolic crisis, and for anyone with diabetes, it is one of the scariest emergencies out there. But what if you had a clear, up-to-date playbook to get through it? Well, the 2023 guidelines give us just that. So today, we're going to decode DKA and break down exactly what you need to know to manage this critical situation. Here's our game plan. We'll start with what DKA actually is. Then we'll get into the new rules for diagnosis, cover a really critical curveball called euglycemic DKA, and then walk through the step-by-step response plan, all the way from the first move to finally winning the fight. So let's start with the crisis itself. To really tackle a problem, you have to understand it first. What is actually going on inside the body when DKA hits? Okay, imagine you're faced with this emergency. What is the very first thing you do? I bet most people would say give insulin, right? I mean, it makes sense. But as we're about to see, that could actually be a huge, even dangerous mistake. We'll get to the real answer in just a minute. You can think of DKA as this perfect storm of three big problems happening at once. First, without insulin, sugar can't get into your cells for fuel, so it just piles up in the blood. That's your high blood sugar. Second, your body panics and starts burning fat for energy instead. This process creates these acidic things called ketones. And third, these ketones build up so much that they literally make your blood acidic. So high sugar, high ketones, high acid. That's the crisis in a nutshell. So, before you can treat DKA, you've got to be 100% sure that's what you're dealing with. And thankfully, the 2023 guidelines give us a super clear 3-part blueprint for making that call. And the cool part is, the diagnosis criteria spell it right out for you. DKA. As you can see, the D is for diabetes, meaning a blood glucose over 11. The K is for ketosis, which means blood ketones are over 3. And finally, the A is for acidosis, which we confirm with either low bicarbonate or a low blood pH. You gotta have all three, no exceptions. Okay, but here's where it gets a little tricky. There's this really important variation of DKA where one of those huge warning signs, the super high blood sugar, is completely missing. It's called euglycemic DKA. Now, euglycemic sounds fancy, but it just means normal blood sugar. So you have all that dangerous acidosis from the ketones, but the glucose meter looks fine, maybe just a little bit high. And you can see how this would be incredibly easy to miss if you weren't specifically looking for it. So what causes this sneaky imposter version of DKA? Well, one of the most common triggers we're seeing these days is a popular class of diabetes meds called SGLT2 inhibitors. But you can also see it with things like starvation, super low-carb diets, or even heavy drinking. Basically, any situation that makes the body churn out ketones for fuel, even when blood sugar isn't off the charts. And this leads to a really crucial difference in how you treat it. Because the blood sugar isn't high, you can't just give insulin by itself. That would make their sugar crash, which is a whole other emergency. So the solution is pretty clever. You give sugar in the form of 10% dextrose through an IV at the exact same time as the insulin. This lets the insulin do its job and shut down the ketone factory, while the dextrose keeps the blood sugar from bottoming out. It's a real balancing act. Okay, so we've got our diagnosis. It's time to act. And the guidelines are crystal clear about the first 2 priorities, and they might not be what you think. Take a look at this number, 7 liters. For an average 154-pound adult who is in DKA, that is roughly how much fluid they've lost. I mean, that is a massive amount of dehydration, and that alone can be life-threatening. And this right here brings us back to that question from the beginning. What's the first thing you do? It's not insulin, it's fluids. Aggressively replacing those lost fluids with an IV is the absolute first step. It is the cornerstone of treatment. Just doing this starts to bring the blood sugar down and helps fix the circulation. And here is the second golden rule, and believe me, it is just as important. Before even 1 drop of insulin is given, you absolutely must know the patient's potassium level. Why? Well, insulin's job is to move sugar and also potassium from the blood into the cells. So if the potassium level is already low and you give insulin, it will plummet even further. And that can cause a fatal heart rhythm. And the guidelines give us a very clear, hard number for this. If that first blood test comes back and the potassium is below 3.5, you stop. You hold the insulin. The priority becomes giving potassium through the IV first. Only when that level is safely back above 3.5 do you get the green light to even think about starting the insulin. All right, fluids are running, potassium is in the safe zone. Now we can finally bring in the insulin to get to the root of the problem, that out-of-control ketone production. Now, the modern way to do this, which is designed to be much safer, is a fixed-rate insulin infusion. So instead of a bunch of complicated math, it's a really simple system based on weight. You just find the patient's weight range on the chart, and that tells you the exact rate to run the insulin. So a 75-kilo person gets 7 units an hour. Simple, effective, and standardized. Okay, this slide shows what is probably the most critical turning point in DKA treatment. So the insulin's working, the blood sugar's coming down nicely, but the acidosis, the A in DKA, is still there. The ketones aren't gone yet. If you stop the insulin now, the ketone factory just fires right back up. So what do? You add sugar. You add a 10% dextrose infusion to the IV. This basically props up the blood sugar, which allows you to safely keep the insulin running to finish the job of clearing out those ketones and fixing the acidosis. So how do we know when we're done? When can we say we've actually won the fight? Well, the guidelines give us really specific targets to aim for. This is what the finish line looks like. These are the 4 numbers we're watching every single hour. We need to see ketones and glucose steadily dropping. We need to see bicarbonate rising, which is proof that the acidosis is reversing. And all the while, we have to keep that potassium level in the safe zone. Hitting these 4 targets every hour tells us that our strategy is working. But, and this is a big but, even after the labs look good and the IVs are stopped, the danger is not over. Just because you've fixed the immediate crisis doesn't mean you fixed what caused it in the first place. The risk of it happening again is actually incredibly high, which is why monitoring the patient closely for the next 48 to 72 hours is so important. And that really is the final crucial takeaway here. Getting through a DKA episode is a huge win, but it's also a massive warning sign. The immediate crisis might be over, but is the danger truly gone? Not really, because the long-term work of managing diabetes to make sure this doesn't happen again, well, that's just getting started.